Wonderful. I think we'll get started. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Kate Seeley, Vice President of the Middle East Institute, and I want to welcome you to today's conversation with Lebanese theater director Sahar Assaf. Just 2 weeks ago, the State Department reached out to us and told us that Sahar was in the United States for a performance of her play No Demand, No Supply, a re-reading of Lebanon's 2016 sex trafficking scandal, and would we want to host her for a talk? And of course, we didn't want to miss this very special opportunity. So she and her three fellow performers have trained down from New York. They came down Monday, and we're very privileged to have them here with us today, straight from their performance at the Between the Seas Festival in New York City just this past Sunday. That was Assaf's first U.S. performance of No Demand, No Supply, a very powerful piece of documentary theater from what I've been reading, and which will also be performed this summer in London at the Shubbak Festival. Now, Sahar developed this performance in a reaction to Lebanon's most notorious sex trafficking scandal in 2016. It was unveiled in 2016 when police broke up a prostitution ring, but only after several of the women had escaped and were able to tell their story. 75 Syrian women refugees had been lured to Beirut with promises of decent jobs, but were instead forced into prostitution. Some had been held for as long as, I read, 4 years. Sandy Issa, a Lebanese investigative journalist who was able to interview some of the women after they were released, said their stories were like something, quote, out of a horror movie. Now, here at MEI, we believe deeply in the power of art, film, and theater to inform, enlighten, and engage people, to deepen their understanding of and compassion for different cultures and peoples. And we believe that changing perceptions can even sometimes lead to changing policies. So we always welcome the opportunity to highlight in Washington the issues that Middle Eastern artists, writers, and filmmakers are grappling with, and see this really as a very important role for MEI. And that's why we're very excited about a new platform that we are launching in the fall, which will give us a very unique ability to engage very deeply with the region's cultural leaders, and that is the new Mei Art Gallery, set to open in September 2014. 2014. We're going back in time, 2019, in our renovated headquarters around the corner on N Street. And we'll be showcasing contemporary and modern art, photography, and video from the region, and introducing these artists and their work to U.S. audiences, and providing a platform for a dialogue around the role of art in society. Our public opening is Saturday, September 14th, and we're opening with a show entitled Arabicity, featuring 2 decades of contemporary Arab art, so please stay tuned. You'll all be getting mailers very soon. Now, getting back to today's event, it's a real honor to host this talk and performance today, and I want to thank the State Department for this opportunity. I don't know if anybody from State is here in the audience, but we hope we can do more with you in the future. And first, we're going to be hearing from Sahar and my colleague Lyne Sneige in conversation for about 35 minutes, and that's going to be followed by a brief reading with the 3 actresses who are here with us today, and finally by an audience Q&A. So briefly on their bios, since you have their full bios in your flyer, Sahar Assaf is an actress, a stage director, and an assistant professor of theater at the American University of Beirut, and there she recently co-established the AUB Theater Initiative with a colleague. Her directing credits are far too many to mention here, but many have focused on social justice issues, and she's a member of the Lincoln Center Directors Lab in New York City and a Fulbright alumnus with an MA in Theater Studies from Central Washington University. Lyne Sneige, who will be in conversation with Sahar, has been with MEI for 5 years as our director of our arts and culture program. She has over 15 years of experience in international arts management and development in the Middle East. Before joining MEI, Sneige was with the British Council, where she served as deputy director and regional projects manager for arts and culture for the Middle East, among her many other credits. Now, the actresses who are joining us on stage, I believe they're all here in front of me, is that correct? They are Nasa Harb. Nasa, could you raise your, oh, wonderful, a theater practitioner and actress who also teaches at AUB. We have, stand. Wonderful. Lynn Hodeb, a drama therapist, actor, and musician who's acted in and managed several theatrical works between Beirut and New York. And Pascal, and I hope I get Schnees, an actress and a wardrobe stylist who has acted in multiple independent short films and theater productions. So welcome to you all. It's really such an honor. If I may ask the audience. Fresh from New York City. If the audience could please silence their phones, we are live streaming, and if anybody wants to tweet, our Twitter handle is at MEI Arts Culture. And now I'd like to turn this over to Lynn. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Kate. Again, Sahar, what a pleasure and an honor to have you with us today. When I started delving into your work, Sahar, I thought you and I need a day-long conversation as opposed to an hour-long conversation. But so congratulations again.
Thank you so
on
much.
Just showing your piece, No Demand, No Supply. Through your play and the testimonies of those 4 women, Sahar, you brought to the US audience the story of 75 of those women who were trapped in this horrific situation. And some of the media reported that that trafficking ring was making about $1 million a month. So that is the magnitude of the operation and the financial gain that was made at the expense of those women trapped in there. Tell us about this play, Sahar. Tell us why you decided to make it and how hard it was to make it.
Good morning, everyone. First, thank you, Lyne, and thank you, Middle East Institute, for hosting us, the actors. And I need to also say thank you to the Department of State, but also to the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, who made this trip possible to Lebanon, especially Her Excellency Ambassador Richard. So No Demand, No Supply is a piece that I've been working on since 2017, actually, or late 2016, early 2017. That's when I started my research on the project. And it tackles the scandal of 2016 scandal of sex trafficking, busting the biggest sex trafficking ring in Lebanon. It was, according to the police reports, the biggest that the Lebanese judicial system had to deal with. So the story went out in beginning of April 2016. We woke up to the story that 75 Syrian women were rescued from what is called Chez Maurice and Silver sex trafficking rings. And the horrific, description of violence that these women had to endure over a period of 10 years, some of them, was shocking to the Lebanese, citizens. However, maybe 3 to 4 weeks after the story came out, it started fading into oblivion in the Lebanese mainstream media. But for me, it affected me deeply. Sometimes certain stories affect you more than other stories. We live in a very turmoiled region, and we think we're immune, but we're not really. So that story really kept surfacing into my conscious, and my everyday life. And I felt I needed to do something, and because I'm a theater maker, theater was my medium to do something. So the opportunity came in 2017 with the Center of Arts and Humanities at AUB. They funded the first version of that performance. And I started looking into the story, and my initial reaction was I wanted to tell the story of these women. So I started digging into their stories, looking for interviews, reaching out to the NGOs who helped, some of them. And then it struck me that they have, the mainstream media, when they covered the story, they talked about the women. They mainly focused on the physical abuse that these women suffered from. They talked about the trafficker. They talked about the doctor who was the gynecologist who was performing abortions. He confessed to performing 200 abortions. They talked about some security authorities who were actually engaged with the network and sometimes facilitating their work and benefiting from their work. They talked about basically every single aspect of that story, with the exception of the buyers. So And then in conversation with Ghada Jabour, who's an expert on exploitation and sex trafficking at CAFA organization in Beirut, I decided to focus the performance on the buyer because it doesn't
the sex
buyer. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the men who were frequenting these brothels were actually contributing to the success of the trafficking ring. As you said, Lynn,
yes.
the ring, according to the police report and some media, coverage, they were making about $1 million a month. So if you do a simple mathematical calculations, around 1,125 men were frequenting these silver and shemuris on daily basis. We're talking about thousands of men who were simply not one of them was arrested. They were not mentioned in the mainstream as, perpetrators. So I felt like this is going to be my take on the story because this is what made me so angry. Of course the trafficker will make me angry, of course the abortion doctor, but these men who are, performing this act, paying the $20 or $30 to have a sexual act with the prostituted women, there was not even condemned, not even blamed.
Of course, this is also a taboo. In our societies, the sex buyers, the fact that men actually frequent those places is also a taboo. They don't talk about it. They don't say why they go and how they...
Absolutely, and they don't have a special profile. You don't know. They can be anyone, basically, and this is what we say in the play. They can be anyone, and the phrase that Ghada Jabour used in an interview with her, she said, they are the Mr. X. So they can be anyone from any social class, from any educational background. They can be in a relationship or not. And so what I did in the play is I juxtaposed the voices of the women that we collected, either through interviews that I did with two of the survivors a year after they were rescued. So there was that time distance that allowed them to reflect on the story and what happened to them. And also I used interviews that were collected by the investigative reporters who tackled the story as it came out. So, and these were interviews that were done right when they were rescued, so like 2-3 days after they were released from Shemuris. So these interviews focused on the torture, the abuse, and my interviews focused more on what does it mean to be prostituted? What does it mean to be trafficked? How does it affect your psychology, your body, your sense of self, and all of this? So I used these interviews, and then I also did interviews with the colonel who took the initiative to raid the brothels and rescue the women. I did interviews with Ghada Jabour, and I also used a study that Ghada did in 2014 on the demand for prostitution, and it's one of its kind in the Arab world, I would say. We don't have many studies that explore prostitution, rest aside the demand aspect of prostitution. And in that study, there are actual, verbatim quotes that the men would say, "Tell Ghada." So what I did is I recorded the quotes from the buyers, and I juxtaposed that with the voices of the women in the play who were delivered live through actresses.
Amazing. How difficult was it to collect this information, Sahar? Were you able to trace those women? How did you have access to those reports? Because in Lebanon, those things are very difficult. Did they know that you were doing a play? Were you able to speak yourself to some of those women, or did you have to just rely on the interviews that they had done?
So for the first version of that play, because we're still working on it, when we did it in Beirut 2017, I had to rely on what is out there. So I really didn't say anything new. All I did is put things together. I added that missing piece to the puzzle of the story, which is the demand aspect. And then after that first performance at AUB, I had my number on the poster that we used to, announce for the play. And I received a phone call, and the woman on the phone said that she's one of the survivors. It was so overwhelming to me, honestly. And I invited her, obviously, to come to the play, and it was scary because I didn't know how she's going to react to the play, how she's going to, if she's going to accept it to begin with, because I didn't really have their permission to tell their stories. I had the stories they shared to the media, which were public in a way. But she came, and I made sure that the social workers in the audience took care of her. And then after the play, I talked to her, and we scheduled, and she accepted to give me an interview. So we scheduled that interview. And one thing she said to me is that, answering my simple question about whether I should go on and do this play again, and she said, yes, people need to know this story because Imad Rehawi will be out, who's the trafficker. And she was right. She was concerned that he's going to be released from prison, and she was absolutely right, because a year, that was April 2017, we did the play. Few months afterwards, he was released from prison. He was released before even the second performance, which was in July. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to say the date because I don't have it. I can't remember it now. But he was released almost a year after he was arrested on a bail of $13,000. So this guy who was trafficking women for 10 years, making $1 million a month, was released on a $13,000 bail after spending a year under arrest. To answer your question, that work on the first performance, and then we were invited by the Women Institute at the Lebanese American University to perform, and this is when Kafa became also more involved in the piece, and they kind of endorsed. So Ghada Jabour gave me access to the Kafa's shelter, where one of the rescued women was still there, and I got to interview her at length for several,
Yes, let me say. So you collaborated on this play with Kafa, which is an NGO. Kafa in Arabic means enough, and it is an NGO that is based in Beirut. Enough violence and exploitation is their motto, and they are very active on gender issues. And you have partnered with them, or you have sought out Kafa for the production of that play. But you do that also, you have done that before in other plays. You often work with NGOs who are... How did this affect the way you brought the play together? When you work with someone who works directly with a community that is struck, what does this bring? Why is it important?
I mean, doing this play had, I had if you like, I had a intention. I had a specific, it's not like doing Hamlet or doing Lorca. I did it for a reason. I did it because I wanted to tell the stories of the women. I did it because hopefully I was, aiming at even a little bit affecting change, making things change in a certain way, especially because the court sessions are still in progress, So that it was
court
very
sessions of the women?
The case itself, the Chez Maurice case, it's still happening. So there's no final verdict yet, unfortunately, 3 years after the incident came out. So it was very important for me to work with the people who work directly, as you said, with the survivors, with the victims. So I wanted Kafa's input on that, especially that when I learned about the study that they did, it was very important that I keep working closely with them and make sure that we're on, the message we're sending out is the message that would hopefully cause some change to happen. Especially because I also adopted the abolitionist approach in the play, which calls for decriminalization of the women, the prostituted women. And this is the approach that Kafa uses as well. So, by focusing on the buyers in the play, we kind of presented a different version of this story through the theatrical experience. Because, as I said, in the media, it was one angle. They were looking at the story from one perspective. What we did in the play is we opened a little bit and we said, okay, let's also talk about how we can probably change or hopefully change the culture that's leading to this, Because
absolutely, and the title of the play comes from this, right?
Absolutely.
You are starting with no demand.
Exactly.
No supply.
Because my theory is that if there were no demand, then if there were no men frequenting the brothels, with that, huge number, probably the traffickers and would have found something else to steal and sell. They were making this profit, and the people helping them to make the profit were kept in the dark, anonymous. We don't know anything about them. They were not arrested.
How it's a very, the audience will be able to experience some of it in the end. It's very raw. The testimonies are very raw and descriptive. How is the audience reacting to this? Are they coming out uncomfortable, or is this helping them come out with sort of more activism towards this? What are the reactions you're getting?
The two main reactions we're getting are, well, tears, a lot of tears in the audience all the time. But what's important for me is that it's making people angry. And I think that's important in theater, especially this kind of theater. My aim wasn't to simply, make audience feel, emotional, sensational reactions. It's important. We need to be compassionate to the women and what happened, so that we don't judge them as well, because there's a lot of shame around also, even if they are trafficked and prostituted. But what's important to me is that people leave the auditorium feeling that feeling that anger. So hopefully they would, be more interested in the story, maybe put pressure on the authorities to kind of move forward with the court and issue a verdict. So these were the main two reactions we're getting. We did the play in Beirut several times. We did it in Athens. We did it in New York this past Sunday, and we go back to Lebanon now, and we were performing beginning of September, in Beirut. And the hope is that we make a tour, national tour, because we all think, the actors and we think that it's important that this story goes out of the city, because it's easier to talk about this issue in Beirut. It's still a taboo, but audiences are more prepared and more open to this subject. However, if we go to the remote areas, that's where it would I'm assuming it's going to be a different reaction. I don't know how they're going to, how they're going to react to it, but we'll see. I mean, I think it's very important to do that.
No, absolutely. You talk about wanting to, create impact, shake things up a little bit. Can you describe one impact that came out for you from the play that you felt, you may have sort of pierced?
Yes, I can. When we did the show at El Medina, which was on July 4, until then, there was no mention of the demand aspect, as I said, in the mainstream media. And luckily, there was a show host attending the show at El Medina, Rima Karaki, her name is, and she hosts a show at New TV called Lyne Sneige, which is a kind of a scoop. I don't know how to, I don't really watch TV, so I don't know exactly how to describe that show, but it's a primetime TV, and they tackle social issues, and they try to make a scoop out of the social issues. She was in the audience, she attended the performance, and then she stayed for the entire talkback session, which took around an hour and a half after the show. And then that week she called me to say, I would like to invite you on my show to talk about the play. I happened to be traveling, and she extended also the invitation to Ghada Jabbour, who was always present for the talkback session.
Ghada Jabbour being the head of
Yes.
CAFA, the NGO who has
She's the head of
partnered.
the exploitation and trafficking unit at CAFA. So Ghada went on the show, and the first question she addressed to Ghada, first two questions were, one, why is this aspect, the aspect of demand, and I'm translating from Arabic to the effect of why this aspect of demand is absent from our minds? Why did I have to wait to see the show to think that the buyers are criminals somehow? And then she dedicated a 20-minute segment on that show to talk about the demand. So she hosted an actor, she hosted some of the survivors, covered their faces, changed their voices, and all she asked them was questions around the buyers that would frequent the brothels. And, this is primetime TV, and then, of course, the episode was on YouTube with thousands of hits. So I think that's a direct impact. This is at least, we're now putting the demand in the public discourse. It has to be part of the narrative to be able to change. At least if we can't change things via the law, unfortunately, in Lebanon, sometimes at least we try and do it little by little through the culture.
Civil society, absolutely. Sahar, you edit and you rewrite material for documentary theater, and your repertoire is very rich. You have done similar plays on other issues that are based on your investigative approach. You have reinterpreted plays from iconic theater directors such as Saadallah Wannous, the iconic Syrian playwright, his iconic play Rituals, and then The Rape. How do you choose your plays? You have, I have read somewhere somebody describing your work as when Sahar reinterprets something, it's as if she is presenting an alternate Lebanon, an alternate Middle East. How do you pick your plays to rework them or put the stories out? And what is your overarching message?
So I work with Robert Myers, who's a playwright, and he's my collaborator in Lebanon. Together, Robert and I, we established the AUB Theatre Initiative. And some of the plays you mentioned, like Saadallah Wanous in particular, our work on Shakespeare and Lorca, Saadallah Wanous, these are productions that we did at the Theatre Initiative, and these were chosen by Robert Myers and myself to present. Saadallah Wanous, we were very interested in presenting his work in English, because Saadallah Wanous, until 2013, when Robert Myers and Nada Saab were translating his work, he has never been translated into English. And then, as you said, he's our biggest playwright in the Arab region, in the Arab world. So we presented his work in Beirut in English to, create some interest in, and our aim was to really travel with the work and take it to the Western world so that we create this interest in him. How do I choose my plays? So I work on things that interest me, I work on things that affect me, especially when I'm doing documentary theater. So when I chose, for instance, to work on the sex trafficking, I wanted to understand, to begin with. I wanted to understand how could this be possible, because I'm naive, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this could happen in a country as small as Lebanon, It just, I wasn't accepting of the story, and I wanted to understand. So that was my first, take on it. When I did work on the Civil War, it's the same thing, because I still can't believe
Was that another play?
Yes, it was a play that I did in 2014. It was on our memories of the Civil War. Because it strikes me that in Lebanon we always tend to forget. We want to forget the war. We don't have a monument to represent the war. There has never been a proper reconciliation process that's that interests the people. Not, of course, the fighting parties did reconciliation amongst themselves, and they're still ruling the country, so they're good to go. But we're not good, So I work on issues that interest me as a human being, as a woman, and that's, so I do theater for me, if that would answer your question. I do the things that and that's why I think, I love to think of my work as genuine, it's at least genuine to me, and that's why I hope it touches people and it affects them.
Absolutely, it is, it's very important that it's for you, but I think your theater also sends a very strong message as to the power of theater and in addressing those issues. And your theater has been described as political, but also one that is deeply humanistic. And in the themes that recur into your work, themes such as oppression and rape and patriarchy, and how do you make those themes humanistic? How do you provide that holistic approach when you are dealing with difficult and heavy issues like this?
I think theater has the power to create compassion. So when you're working on, as a theater maker, as an actor, when I'm working on a play, say the rape, it's very sensitive topic. So the rape talks about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right? And it was obviously banned. It wasn't performed much in the Arab world. It was banned in Syria because it's very sensitive. And Saadallah Wanous had a very humanistic approach to the issue. It talks about two families, Israeli family and Palestinian family, and he gives us a deep insight into the two worlds of these people. And I'm very biased to the Palestinian cause, right? There's huge injustice happening. But when I'm working on that play, it was very important to me to approach the Israeli characters from the play, from their perspective, not from my perspective, and to help my actors to delve into these characters from the perspective of the character. So it teaches you compassion, with no question. So, and I think I approach every single play regardless of the topic. When I did No Demand, to go back to our subject today, I was very angry. really angry. And every time I would read something, and especially the study that Ghada did, made me so, uncomfortable. And I started looking at all the men around me, and you see them all as culprits, But this is not a good feeling, obviously. It's not something, it's not constructive, doesn't help you too. And I have to be very honest, even with myself, the first performance was very emotional, and it was very aggressive, and I was almost attacking the audience, especially the men in the audience. And then I started shifting that, paradigm a little bit, because if I wanted to affect them, if I wanted to tell them, please think twice before purchasing sex from a prostituted woman, I cannot attack them. If I attack them, they're not going to listen to me. So I don't know if I answered your question,
yes, you
but
did.
what I try to do is, of course, I'm a human being, and I get affected, obviously, but with reflection, with distance, then it matured.
Yes. Absolutely. Sahar, you studied journalism and then you moved into sociology. What brought you to theater?
What brought me to journalism and sociology is the right question. I've always wanted to be a theater maker, an actress, to be very specific. But I grew up in a conservative society, and it wasn't extremely accepted. So that's why I ended up studying first journalism, and then I moved into sociology because I was lost. I didn't know what to do with my life, And I kept doing theater for without any financial compensation. And then I decided that I'm going to stop everything I'm doing and go study theater. So I went and studied theater at an older age, comparatively speaking. So, but I'm very grateful now that I wasn't happy when I was studying sociology and journalism, and I've always felt like there's a basic need that is not being fulfilled. But now I'm very, very grateful that I had the opportunity to do that, because it really feeds into my work now.
Absolutely. It is very clear that there is a journalistic approach and an anthropological and sociological approach to all of the work that you do. So
for sure.
I'm sure that this has imbued your theatrical experience a lot. You say theater is a political act and a peaceful resistance. Is this how you are resisting?
Yes, especially when you live in a country like Lebanon, where nothing much is changing, no positive change is being, especially, I have to also be specific, especially from the state, the government. So just the act of doing theater, because there's a lot of pessimism around you, there's a lot of negative, vibes going on all the time. So just the fact that you're still doing the one thing that you love, although with all the difficulties, with the censorship, with the lack of funding, with the lack of support from the government, with even lack of support from the audience sometimes, because we don't have a theater culture. It's growing now. It's really some interesting changes been happening in Lebanon. There's theater spaces that are opening, more audiences going, but in general we don't have a theater culture. We don't teach theater at school. We don't take our children to see theater, not even in some universities, we don't have, like at AUB we don't have a theater major. We're trying. So with all of this, I think just the fact that you're still doing it with all the love, with all the passion, is a political act, because that's how you change the culture. It doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely, I agree. And that is a great segue into talking about my next question to you, because it's hard to be talking about the theater and the performing arts in Lebanon and the Middle East without talking really about censorship. And how hard was it for you to show this play, and how easy is it going to be to tour it across Lebanon?
So I'm not sure the audience know, but in Lebanon we still practice censorship, meaning before we perform a play, we have to submit the text to the censorship office, who would give you a permission or not, or sometimes would ask you to do changes in the text of the play. Now, happy news is that this NGO called March, they just submitted a bill to abolish censorship in Lebanon, theater censorship. And hopefully the bill will pass and it will become a law.
In time.
In time. We don't know when, but hopefully. So, but meanwhile, we will have to submit this play, No Demand, No Supply, to the censorship office, which we haven't done yet because we only performed on AUB campus at LU and one public performance at Al Medina that was open for free to the public. So we haven't done that yet. When we go back to Lebanon now and in preparation to perform in September, we will have to submit the text. Honestly speaking, I don't know how they're going to receive it because there's criticism in the play for the security authorities, for instance, some of the security authorities who were, supporting the trafficking ring. The women in the play mentioned that at different instances in the life of that trafficking ring, they would get arrested, they would be taken to the precincts, interrogated. They would say that we're trafficked, we're not here because we want to be here, and all of this, but then the trafficker would come, he would pose as a client or a pimp, would bribe the authorities, take them back to the Shemoris, and they resume work. So when the last raid happened, they didn't believe it's going to change anything, really. So it's going to be critical with the censorship office. I don't know how they're going to receive it. There's also the other aspect, which is the rawness of the interview, of the words used in the play, because it's not a nice topic. It's not a soft topic. Absolutely. And we didn't want to make it soft in the play, obviously. So we'll see.
All right. You spoke about Beirut being an important node in this vibrant and engaged performing arts. Can you say very briefly, because we have like a minute or two left before we invite the actresses to the stage, can you say why you think Beirut is still occupying the space? We know in other art forms the power centers have shifted elsewhere, perhaps in the Gulf, and Beirut in the performing arts seems to be really the hub, the node for this creativity. Why do you think so, very quickly, and who do you think is supporting that?
I think if that's still happening, I don't know, I take your word for it. I think it's because it's for two things. One, although we have censorship, but in comparison to the other countries in the region, we do have a bare minimum level of freedom of expression. So people, tend to be more open about subjects and more daring, I would say. And also because we have, young, emerging, mid-career professionals, theater makers who are fighters, really. I call all of them fighters because, nothing is stopping them. They're unstoppable. So, and they keep, as I said, they keep doing what they're doing because I think for us theater makers, because it's, when you're in this field, you're in this field because you can't be in any other field. So we don't really have a choice. We have to do what we have to do. So I give them credit. It's not the government, unfortunately. It's not the state.
Thank you very much. I would like to very quickly invite the actresses up, and we are going to come back for the questions and answer. There will be a question and answer session after the actresses perform. I think Sahar is going to tell us just very quickly that technique that you're seeing. So the actresses are wearing the headphones. Go ahead.
So just so everyone's clear on what's happening. So in this performance, the testimonies that are shared by the actresses, the women testimonies, are actually shared through a technique we call the recorded delivery technique, which is when actors wear earphones and they repeat exactly what they hear. So the actors in this technique don't receive the text of the play as written text, they receive it as a track. They don't memorize the text, so they're not memorized. They're listening live to the sound, to the voice of the survivors that they're playing, and repeating exactly what they hear with a split-second difference between them. So just so you're clear. Thank you.
أنا كنت عايشة باللاذقية بسوريا، فتعرفت على شخص، قلت له أنا بدي أشتغل، بدي أدبر شغلي عشان أشتغل وأمن حالي. قال لي خلص بتروحي على لبنان في شغل بمطعم منشغلك فيها. قلت له طيب أوكي، بس كيف بدي أطلع؟ إنه ما في حدا كفيل يكفلني عشان أدخل لبنان. قال لي من فوتك تهريب. قلت له أنا ما بصير شي علي؟ قال لي لا. قلت له طيب. ما أخذني جابني على لبنان، أخذني على هذا شو اسمه المعلم عماد. قال لي هذا الشغل، هذا اللي بدي شغلك عنده بالمطعم. قلت له طيب. قال لي بالأول باخدك منشان تشوفي الغرف عنده. قلت له ماشي. أخذني لعنده على الأوتيل منشان نشوف الغرفة. فتت لعنده قال لي إنه هدول الغرف. قلت له طيب. فوتني على غرفته على المكتب لعنده. دخلت لعنده على المكتب قال عدت في عنده كاميرا، في صبايا برا عم يدخلوا زباين ويوقفوا. يعني هل بتحكي يعني كانوا الصبايا عم بيلطشوا الشباب. قلت له شو هيدا؟ قال لي مو بدك تشتغلي؟ قلت له ايه بس شو هيدا الشغل؟ قال لي هيدا الشغل اللي عندي دعارة. قلت له لا أنا ما بشتغل شغل دعارة. قال لي لا بدك تشتغلي. قلت له ماني جاي لا اشتغل شغل دعارة. قال لي لا بدك تشتغلي غصبا عنك. صرت ابكي. عطاله الشوفير اللي جابني مصاري قد ايه عطاه مش عارفه، وخلاه يروح وانا ضليت. قام ضربني، صار يضربني بالكبل على اجري عشان ضل عنده واشتغل. بالاخر شغلني، وكل ما قال له بدي فل يضربني.
كنت ساخنه، قلت لهم انا ما رح اقدر اشتغل، بدي اسبوع لحتى اقدر اشتغل اذا بدكم اشتغل. قال ليه؟ قلت لهم انا ساخنه. قال بدنا نشوف. قلت له شو بدك تشوفي؟ قال بدنا نشوف انك ساخنه. قلت له لا ما بتشوفي، اكيد ما حتشوفي. يعني تخيل حدا حاطط كف بايده بده يشوف اذا ساخنه ولا لا. قلت له لا ما حتشوفي. قال ايه المسا بس تيجي معلمك هو بيشوف. اجا المسا بتخليها تشوف؟ لا ما حخليها تشوف. اكلت ضليت اكل قتل 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 حتى اخر شيء تاكدت انه انا ساخنه. تاكدت، فوتوني لجوا على الغرفه ومسكوني وعرفوا انه انا ساخنه. قال ايه البنت ساخنه. قال ايه بدك تشتغلي؟ قلت له كيف بدي اشتغل وانا ساخنه؟ قال بتفوتي هلا على الحمام والصبايا بيعلموكي كيف تحطي قطنه. فتت علموني كيف حط قطنه، صرت حط قطنه واشتغل، حط قطنه واشتغل.
بتحس الوحدة حالها انه هي خلص حياتها انتهت هون. انا عبدة، انا جارية، صرت حس حالي اني انا شرموطة، منتهك حقي، اني انا جسمي عم يتاكل شوي شوي. فكرت اني انا موت، انه الشخص اللي عم يجي عم ياكل جسمك، انه الدعرة مو والله انه سوري انه وحدة عم تنتاك، بس ما هي وحدة من فوق لتحت عم تنتاك، من فوق لتحت انه هي عم تموت. يعني شخص مو نايم مع وحده، نايم مع جسم. الزبون ما بيفكر انه هاي المرأة انسانة، لا عم يوصفها بالحيوانة. وياما في زباين قالوا انه نحن بنجي بس لنفضي فيكي ونروح، ممنوع تبكي، بدك تبلعي البكوة، بدك ضلك ضحكانة انت على الزبون حتى لو بده ينام معك 4 مرات. هلا في زبون بفوت ساعة بينام مع الوحدة 4 مرات، خلص انا دافع حقك بساعة. يعني انا صرت بمكان عم انشرى وانباع. يعني أنا بقول لهم داعش مو يلي فات على سوريا، مع عماد داعش، مع الزباين داعش، شي عم ياكلك. أنا شفت الاغتصاب بكل أنواعه، شفت القهر بكل أنواعه، شفت العذاب بكل أنواعه عن جد، لأني أنا مالي بنت هيك، أنا ما خلقت لكون شرموطة.
Thank you to Nazha, Pascal, and Lynn for this remarkable and powerful performance. We've experienced a couple of minutes, and I can only imagine what the entire play's impact is. We want to open it up to questions and answers. Yes, Yes, we have a question at the front and then at the back.
Very powerful and moving. I don't think it's on, but it doesn't matter. I wanted to ask whether you've had any threats. Has there been any violence directed towards you that because of this play?
No, luckily. No, we haven't.
The gentleman in the back.
Thank you very much. I'm Raghuveer Goyal. I'm a journalist. I have seen many reports from the State Department, sex trafficking, and I've been asking this question for the last 25 years, White House and State Department. I still have not gotten a real answer how to stop this sex trafficking or girls trafficking. And I feel very sorry for this woman. In India, there have been many films. I was talking to the director. And also, there's a show, Crime Patrol, real stories of sex traffickers. My question is that, do you see any of the women from South Asia, because it's a big business there, in your part of the world? I've been hearing that thousands and thousands of girls are being brought up in the Middle East for luring for big jobs and money, and parents sell them because they are girls. Thank you.
I can answer that, if that's okay. I work at the Migrant Community Center in Beirut, and there are many cases of women who come into the center where they are also trafficked. They come in through the system of the sponsorship system in Lebanon. It's really where the, women come in to work and as domestic workers, but sometimes they are taken into other kinds of jobs, and that happens. So these cases, we've had so many cases of also women coming from South Asia who are trafficked. And it's really hard to also, this is even harder, I think, when it comes to women who are coming from that part of the world, with the fact that we have a sponsorship system, because the government doesn't really allow for any like mobilization action that can happen, and this organization is one of the very few movements that has been working on really tackling these issues. So this is very present in Lebanon, actually, and right now we're really working on abolishing this system. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers it, but yeah.
Any other questions? Can I see? Yes, I see a question to the back, and then here.
Sorry, it's a simple question. Are you trying to have, like, are you Syrian, or do you have, you're trying to have the Syrian accent?
We're Lebanese. Yeah.
No, we're Lebanese, but
Wonderful.
because of the technique, you kind of unconsciously imitate the accent, the tonality, the breath, the silences. So this is part of this technique. That's why it comes out as
It's great.
easy.
I thought you're Syrian, so.
There's a question here and at the front.
So my question is about the demand side of the equation. Much of the problem, of course, is related to our culture in the Middle East, how men feel empowered. I need sex now. Get it, whether it's my wife, go to a brothel, or whatever it is, what have you. So I think this is the first part of the problem. The other part of the problem, obviously, we have a weakness in the Middle East, which is the current conflict that we have in Syria. Your play has managed to come out and put this cultural issue on the stage, telling you not only that we have a problem with the war, but also our men, how we bring up our men, there's something wrong there. So I'm wondering, with this censorship, the way the Middle East is structured, the way the political structure is, how do you think you're going to make an impact if you have a play like this? How will you make this impact? How will you be able to change the mindset of the people? Because it comes from home first. You need to raise your child in the proper manner, really. Then you tackle the conflict. Considering there's such high censorship, how do you think you're going to get the message across? And what I was shocked to hear today is that this play was only showed in Lebanon. Why wasn't it performed in Jordan, where there's a huge refugee community? Other places in the Middle East, I don't want to even start talking about Egypt.
Thank you for the question. To be very honest, when we're doing theater, if we think about the impact, maybe we will stop doing theater, because you're right, the problem is huge, and where do you start, really? But as theater makers, I think our job, especially when we're doing such kind of work, it's for us first, but we're doing it to say something. And as long as we're putting this conversation, this topic in the public conversation, it's already something. And then the impact we had on the mainstream media, that's also to be, it's also important. But I think, our aim is not only to perform in remote areas. We would hope to take this play to the schools, to universities, because it would be interesting if we can reach to the young men, to the boys, just before they go out and purchase their first sexual encounter. I think if they hear the women, what they say in the play, and then the effect and the impact it leaves on them for like years, decades to come. They might think twice before doing it. I want to be hopeful and say they might think twice before doing it. And that's why you would need laws to say, like everything else, because there's going to always be people who would not think and would just do it, and would, even if it, because some of the men in the study, and we shared their voices in the play, they knew that these women were trafficked. They would say like, yeah, she was abused, but it's not my job. I'm paying money. I just do my thing and leave. So there's going to always be people like that. But when you have laws, like a mechanism of laws to say, if you do this, you're going to be put in jail, or you have to pay fine, or whatnot, hopefully with time it will change the culture, like what happened in Sweden, for instance, with the Nordic model. When they started implementing this, it sounded impossible. But now it's becoming less and less of a problem there. I wanted to say something else and I forgot now. You want to comment on that? Jordan thing, yes, we would love to take this play outside, but I don't know if it's going to be approved and if it would pass censorship in the Arab countries. Let's hope it passed censorship in Lebanon first.
Any more questions? Yes, I see a question in the back and a question in the front here.
Thank you very much for all the work you're doing. This seems to me like it's documentary film material with the actual women who went through this trauma. Has it been done? Is it being done?
As a documentary film? Mm-hmm. Do we know? Not to my knowledge, no. But okay. Maybe I'm mistaken. But you're right to say yes, documentary theater is very similar to documentary film. The difference is in the liveness of the event. So all the documents we use in the play, interviews, the police report, the study, so that's why I don't say I'm a playwright. I'm simply editing and rewriting, not rewriting even, just cutting and editing and doing a kind of a montage and presenting the same story with a new lens, with a new perspective.
Thank you.
Along those same lines, I was wondering if we might someday have access to like a filmed version of the performance. I think it's probably more powerful live, but in cases where it is difficult to bring the play to people, a link can sometimes find its way in.
Yes, sorry if that was your question. I misunderstood your question then. About that play itself, yes. Yes, we're filming now. We're filming for our own personal archive, but yes, hopefully in the future we'll put the film out there for people. Although the play was made in a way, it's a very simple performance. We're calling it a performance lecture, and all we need to perform the piece is a space and chairs. So it's made in a way, the intention was to keep it simple, and because it's like theater cannot like power these stories. No matter how you do like visual effects, I thought it's not important. What's important is to keep it simple, focused. This is what we need to know.
Hi, my question is for the actresses. Like, how did that affect you when you hear, especially with this technique you're using, when you're hearing the voices with all the pain, all the anger, especially for people who speak Arabic, they know how harsh these words are. How did that affect you? Like, I heard only one sentence and I felt like, wow, it's too much. Like,
thank you.
When we first started like reading, actually not reading the script, like hearing and repeating after, like you feel like it's harsh because I'm still listening to the voice of the woman speaking, and it is very harsh. But after a while, it's like we start focusing on a technique because there's no place for our feelings. It's just, we are like a vessel. We need to just channel these ladies. So I'm just listening to what she's saying, and like words are coming out of my mouth and the emotions are coming out of my face and my body, but I'm not trying to make any, like, I'm not thinking about them. I'm not trying to make a character. So it's totally different than memorizing a script and doing, like, being the character. It's just being the character without thinking it.
Do you want to comment on the same thing that Pascal said, because the technique is too fast. Someone's talking, so there's no time to actually rationalize anything. You just have to say it out loud. What happens is after the performance, if you decide to indulge in what you're listening, it's going to be very hard. So you have to kind of say, I'm going to create a distance, I'm going to finish the performance and just try to stop thinking about it, because then you're going to be in a loop of just emotional trauma, because you're actually listening to very horrible incidents that should not be happening, and they are. This is in addition to the fact that the ethical part of what you're doing. We have to be faithful to those women, and we cannot let our emotions be exaggerated. Even if we feel so much pain, we just have to try to kind of say exactly what they're saying with all the distance that we have to create. It's
Even
very
with
hard.
the stumbling, like if she stumbles with words, I will stumble with words.
But it's not easy. But with time, everything becomes less painful and you get used to it,
And I
which
think
is
it's-
horrible as well.
I think it's very similar to the process of these women when they're telling the testimonies a year later. So when you're hearing it for the first time, you're going to be very emotional, but the person who's talking is not as emotional. So that's what she's also like referring to in terms of the ethical part and the like being faithful to the story, because so many of those women have processed their experiences, and when they're telling the story, they're not in the same place as in the beginning.
And for some reason, Lebanon makes you, to a certain extent, very harsh, because you constantly see unacceptable behavior, horrendous acts, and you kind of have to deal with it. You have to be resilient, or you can go mad.
Can I say one word? I just want to clear something. For whoever is not Lebanese, Lebanon is, you will see the harshness because it's a very small country. Like, people are horrible everywhere and they're nice everywhere. But Lebanon is a very, very small country. You're always aware of everything happening around you. So it can be overwhelming. And it's in the Middle East. It's where it's not really peaceful right now for a while.
Thank you. We had a question.
Thank you. And first of all, salute to your effort and the courageous step. Thank you. The question is, how long is the play? Yeah. Second, how many characters are there? Right. Third one is, you mentioned that this, let's say, the supply side is there on the stage. Is the demand side is already there? And the third part, which is the lawmakers or whatever, police, is in the play too. And finish this, and then I have
Yes,
another question.
so I don't forget. So the play is 50 minutes. There are 4 actors on stage. I play the narrator, so I narrate the story and I make the links. I have 4 actresses helping me, and they play the role of the survivors. They give these testimonies. The demand side is present on stage through the voiceover. So what I did is I recorded the quotations I got from the interviews that Kafa had with them. I pulled out some quotes, and I used these, and I had actors, male actors, record these voices. And then we play them. And we have one theatrical game that goes on stage, which is with the chairs. So the female actors bring in their chairs and they sit on them, and we represent each voice we hear from the males through a chair. And the end image of the performance is a visual reminder of the discrepancy in the numbers. Because when we talk about prostitution or sex trafficking, we only talk about women in general. The first image that comes to mind is a woman. But in fact, the numbers are outrageous. For every woman at Chez Maurice, there were 105 men buying her, I want to say, not even like a service from her. So the numbers are, big. There's a big difference, and we try and represent this discrepancy through, a visual element on stage.
And you mentioned many times that the theater is an act of politics. So are there any of the politicians who have a concern about the laws first, and then second about the censorship, had the chance to come and see this play somewhere?
Not yet. When we did the performance at Al Madina, we sent out, especially Kafa, they sent out invitations to all their lists, and they're not interested. Why do they want to come see it? We're going to harass them to come see it next time, I promise. And we had a wonderful idea from the mother of Nazha, one of the actors. Should I say? Maybe we shouldn't say. Okay, I should not say. Thanks.
Because if we say it live, then we won't be able to do it.
So we have a question in the back and one in the front as well.
Hi. Thank you so much. Your performances were really extraordinary. I actually have a comment and a question, and I'll try and keep it short. The comment is just, I was really interested, you used the term prostituted, and it reminded me of how people make a conscious effort to use the term enslaved rather than slave when they talk about African American, particularly in that context, to emphasize the process and the mechanisms and the people that turn a person into a slave, and not that slaveness as an identity. And I thought your comment really made me think of that. And the question is actually just about the overall structure and the choices you made. I'm interested in kind of the dramatic and the ethical process. You had to obviously edit and juxtapose and think about where things went and sequence in the larger context. So if you could talk about any aspect of that, I'd appreciate it.
When you're doing for prostituted women, yes, I make an effort to always say prostituted, because for a woman to be a prostitute, she needs a prostitutor. So yes, they are prostituted. And for the ethical, it's a huge question in documentary theater, huge. And of course, we try to be as aware and as sensitive as possible. When I just give you an example of some techniques and methods we do to be as ethical as possible. When I did the interview with the character that Pascal plays, I called her Noor in the play. It's not her real name. She was very, and you notice like her character, she speaks and she uses like the real words that should be used, and she's very raw, and it's very powerful, her testimony, because it's a reflection. It's really a year after, and she's been at the shelter for a while, so she's been getting help. So now, and she's also a writer. She writes like almost daily in her diary. So and it struck me that during the interview she was very composed and calm. Like Ghada and I were both in tears, and she was completely, and she would say things like, they are ISIS. You know, it really made me cry, this comment. And she was going to come and see the show, but before that, when I cut the, because she gave me a 2-hour interview, and I probably used like 10 minutes of that interview. And the way where I placed her testimony would make a difference to the story. So what I did is I sent her these excerpts, and I made sure that she's okay with the cuts that I made. So this is one thing I would do if I had the chance. I didn't have the chance to do this with the initial version of the play from the interviews collected by the investigative reporters. But these were public. So if you go on YouTube, you'd find these, And I assumed, and maybe it's a wrong assumption, that they gave they gave their approval for the journalist. They obviously didn't give approval to me to use the stories. I'm doing this in good faith, and I'm hoping I'm doing, a good thing. If one day they come and say, you cannot do this, I will respect this and I will stop doing it. But for now.
Thank you. There's a question at the front.
Thank you, ladies, for that very powerful performance. Just a very quick question to Sahar. Do you know what has happened to some of these 75 women? Obviously, you've been in touch with some of them, but are they in Beirut? Are they with their families? How are they surviving and moving on?
When they were rescued and taken to the precinct for interrogations to make sure the story they're telling and all of this, they were released because the government doesn't have any program to help them really. So before they were released, the officers get in touch with NGOs who work on similar issues to try and help them, take care of them. So obviously the NGOs, they don't have place for 75 women in their shelters. And some did not want to go to the shelters anyway, they just wanted to be. So unfortunately, we don't know their whereabouts. I know for a fact that few of them got resettled. The Noor was resettled in Canada. She's there with her children, safe. Some of them were resettled in different countries. Some of them I learned through the NGOs that did not want to go back to Syria because they would be judged. No, their families would not welcome them back. So unfortunately, they are at risk of exploitation, or so we think. The experts working in the field would tell you they are at risk of exploitation because they're not protected. They don't probably have financial support. They might go back to the, prostitution to survive. So, no, the answer is we don't know. We know about a few, but not the majority.
I'm just follow-up question because she is asking about victims. The victims were named were out.
In the police report.
Yes.
Yeah, you would find the names, some of the names, because the police report.
Some of the names,
yeah,
not all of the names.
Yes. Some of the names. Okay. Yes, not all, because I tried to find, I wanted to, I was reading the police report and there was no mention of the 75. But the 75, according to the police, they were Syrian. One of them, actually 74 were Syrian and one was Iraqi. Some of the names are mentioned in the police report, which is also a public property. That's what the one I used is public property. It wasn't a confidential material. It wasn't a confidential document. Any citizen can go and ask for the.
My second question: are these women too are like the South Asian woman sponsored or just brought without sponsorship?
The South Asian.
Yeah, when she her answer to.
Oh,
for.
Yes.
So they were brought to Lebanon, according to the stories they told, they were brought to Lebanon by different guys. One of them is called Ahmed Shaheen, is the name they mention. And they were promised jobs at a restaurant, at a pharmacy, at different places. And some of the, want to say most of them were smuggled, because one of them gives the testimony, the Ruba, whom we called Ruba in the play. She gives the Lyne plays. She says that she asked, actually, she wanted to come in to Lebanon, and he told her, like, we have to smuggle you in. And she's like, I'm concerned, nothing will happen to me. And he said, nothing will happen to you. So they were not brought in legally, so they were not sponsored, and they were imprisoned, so they cannot leave the premise of the Chez Maurice anyway. But I don't know about the, yeah. Yes, of course.
Any more questions in the room? Before we close this program, thank you all very much for coming. Thank you, Sahar. Thank you, Lyne. Thank you, Nezha and Pascal, for this wonderful. We want to wish you a lot of luck, and thank you very much for today.